right, my name's John Ford, and we'll start this one out. Play a song. This is an old song. I think this was recorded in 1928. I might be wrong, but it's a song by Reverend Robert Wilkins. And I've been doing this song a while, and I knew who Robert Wilkins was, but I didn't know he had a son that his son's name's John Wilkins, and I think he's in his 80s, and he's still playing down in Clarksdale. I went down to the Clarksdale Juke Joint Festival in April, it was, this past April. And I played down there, and he was down there with his gospel blues band. So he does this song. I'm pretty sure he does this song and kind of tells the story behind it. And short story, this song, Robert Wilkins wrote this song, which is called That Ain't No Way to Get Along. And then he wrote another song, which is the exact same song with different lyrics, called Prodigal Son. And the Rolling Stones covered Prodigal Son. I'll just do the other one. I'm going home, friends say down, take my mama, sit down, take my mama, going home, yeah, sit down, take my mama, going home, yeah, sit down, take my mama, and that's no way to get along. Get low down when mama treated your person wrong. Mama treated you wrong. Get low down when mama treated your person wrong. Get low down when mama treated your person wrong. That's no way to get along. Like treating me like my poor heart was made of rock and stone, made of rock and stone. Treat me like my poor heart was made of rock and stone. Treat me like my poor heart was made of rock and stone. And that's no way to get along. Yeah. That wasn't due, pretty mama, beg your son, wish he's dead and gone, wish I was dead and gone. Don't make your son, mama, wish he's dead and gone. Don't make your son, mama, wish he's dead and gone. And that's no way for me to get along. I stood by the roadside, by crying all by myself, crying all by myself. Stood on the roadside, I cried along by myself. Stood on the roadside, I cried along by myself. And that's no way for me to get along. I wanted some train to come along, not taking me away from here, to take me away from here. We made to get along. Yeah. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, oh, yeah. That ain't the way me get along. Thank you very much. All right. Yeah. Okay, Robert Wilkins. And then I'm just going to tell you, but last time I kind of went chronologically more, and this time I'm just going to kind of go back over some stuff and fill in the holes a bit of what I left out last time. Hang on. Let me get my notes. I don't know if I need this or not. I'll use it anyway. Let's see. Well, I ran upon this chronology of blues recordings, and the last time, like I said, we'll kind of run over some of the stuff I went over before. First, blues recording is considered Crazy Blues by Mamie Smith in 1920. In 1920, 21, 22, there were recordings by Edith Wilson, Lucille Hegeman, and her Blue Flame Syncopators. That's a good name right there. Maul Rainey and Bess Smith recorded in 1923, along with Sylvester Weaver's Guitar Rag, which was kind of picked up by Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys. This is kind of a side note. You may have heard of Bob Wills' Texas swing, what they call Western swing is what they call it. And his sound is kind of replicated in, if you know of the Allman Brothers, Dickie Betts of the Allman Brothers, and their guitar harmonies are very closely linked to Bob Wills' fiddle and guitar and steel guitar harmonies, you know, so it's kind of the same sound there. Let's see, who else? Old Southern Jug Band in 1924 recorded Daddy Stovepipe and Papa Charlie Jackson, also in that year. We had Blind Lemmer Jefferson coming in 1925. Is considered the first hard blues singer to record. Blind Blake, if you've ever heard of Blind Blake, that same year, and a guy named Pegleg Howe from Georgia. I ran into a guy down in Valdosta, Georgia, and I play a lot in Valdosta now. Over the past couple of years, I've played there a lot because I ran into a guy down there that is not really a blues player, but he played with Doc Watson back in the 70s. His name is Joe Smothers, and he's kind of taken me under his wing. He lets me stay at his house all the time when I'm down there, so he's a good friend to have. And he does a good, he kind of told me about Pegleg Howe, and he does a good song by him. 1927, of course, we have people like Blind Willie McTell and Barbecue Bob coming and recording. The Memphis Jug Band, Lucille Bogan. 1928 was Robert Wilkins, Leroy Carr. I don't know if I did that song last time, maybe I should do it this time. Leroy Carr from Indianapolis was a piano player, and he was a very early influence, a very early blues player, influence on a lot of people. And then the use of the word boogie woogie came in 1928 with a song by a guy named Pinetop Smith. And Charlie Patton, of course, 1929, which, well, I'm not sure about this. It says here that his It was the first version of Rollin' and Tumblin' Blues, or Roll and Tumble Blues is how they have it here. I know a lot of people have covered that song, but it's credits Charlie Patton for recording it. And I did the song last time called Pony Blues. Charlie Patton recorded that in 1929 over in Richmond. And this past summer, my wife and I took a tour of the grounds where that recording studio once stood. And there's only one building left. It's the old Star Piano Factory. It started out as the Star Piano Factory, Richmond, Indiana. And I forget what street it's on, but there's kind of a park there now, and there's only one building left. And the Star Piano Company became Jeanette Records, because the Star Piano Company, usually the way it goes is they had pianos and they needed to sell them, so they would sell them to various record companies, and then they got into the business. And also, I know like furniture stores would be selling phonographs, so that a lot of times they would get into the record business. Anyway, Jeanette Records, that's where Charlie Patton recorded in 1929, and they have a sign right there that says, "This is where the studio once was." So we got to stand right there where, Charlie Patton recorded there, Lawrence Welk recorded there, Louis Armstrong recorded there, and a bunch of other people, but that's the three that I remember. Let's see. Well, I should do it. I'll do a Charlie Patton tune. Not that one. This one is a new one that I learned. It's from 1932. And it was recorded in New York City, actually. And Charlie Patton, at some point, he didn't live too long. He lived, I think he was 41 maybe, or in his early 40s when he died. And he got his throat cut, playing those old juke joints, and he got in a fight and got his throat cut and survived, but his voice was never the same after that. I think the last time I said that they said that you could hear Charlie Patton from 500 yards away. His voice was so loud. But by 1930, this was recorded in 34. By 1934, his health had declined. He had heart problems. His throat had been cut, and he wasn't singing a whole lot. So he let his girlfriend sing. Oh man, I'm going to blank on her name too. Bessie. We'll just call her Bessie. She sings most of the songs. She can sing the high notes, and Charlie's kind of singing the low notes and what he can. Let's see. A lively number called "Oh Death." Just look out the door, just look out the door, just look out the door, Lord, I know my time and Lord. Was in one morning, death come in the room. Was in one morning, death come in the room. Was in one morning, death come in the room. Lord, I know my time and Lord. Oh hush, somebody is calling me. Oh hush, somebody is calling me. Oh hush, somebody is calling me. Lord, I know my time and Lord. Oh death, mother and go. Oh death, down to my mother and go. Oh death, to my mother and go. Lord, I know my time ain't long. Just move my pillow, turn my pillow round. Just move my pillow, turn my pillow round. Just move my pillow, turn my pillow round. Lord, I know my time ain't long. Oh husband, somebody is calling me. Oh husband, somebody is calling me. Oh husband, somebody is calling me. Lord, I know my time ain't long. Lord, I know my time ain't long. Oh, death. Thank you. Thank you. All right, I'll put this one up. This is a resonator guitar. I think I explained that last time. This is a steel body guitar that's a little bit louder than, it cuts through a little bit louder than the acoustics. And so they made that back, I don't know, at the turn of the century, I guess. So you're playing a big place, you could kind of cut through and be heard a little bit better.
What's the difference between a dobro and that?
Well, generally, dobros are considered to be wooden. That's the way I distinguish them. But actually, I mean, they're the same thing. The National Resonator, this is a Gretsch. This guitar is only about, I think, about 10 years old. It's not that old. But the National company, they started, I forget when, I think around the turn of the century, making these. And then, I forget the name of the brothers, but dobro is actually, do you know?
No,
The brother?
I'm just asking, you talking about the 20th or the 21st century?
Oh, yeah, I gotta designate that. The beginning of the 20th century, yeah,
Okay.
I think. But there were two brothers, and they called I forget the name of them now. The Dobbins brothers or Doherty brothers, I forget what it is. But they started the National Guitar Company. And then they split. And so when they split, I think I might be wrong on this, but they started another company and they called it instead of the name, like the Doherty brothers, they called it Dobro. So it was just short for it.
They sound alike, don't they?
They do, but they have, to me, they sound a lot different. They both had that really mid-rangey kind of sound, but a wooden guitar, the wooden dobros are used more for bluegrass, and the bluegrass players play them like that, and they have a certain sound, and then these are all steel bodies are generally played more by the blues players, So.
But doesn't the dobro have a thicker neck too, doesn't it, with it?
Some of them do. Yeah, that square neck. It's a square neck, so it rests on your knee better if you're playing it, down like that. And they make them both. It's called a square neck, and it's it's like a big 4x4 almost, going out like that. And it's just easier to play on your lap. And but they do make what they call the round neck, which is just like that. So.
So do most of the blues players sit when they play?
Most of the old ones did, but I don't know. Back in the day, I don't know if they sat because they were tired of standing. That's the way what I do, because I just feel more comfortable that way. But I always tell people, it's like, I think that blues sound comes from, like, you know, if you worked all day and you were tired, you know, and it's like,
Sat on the front porch and
you
played.
you sat down and played. It wasn't, you didn't get up. Yeah.
It's the Dapiera brothers.
Ah, what is it?
1928.
Okay, what's the name again?
Dapiera, D-O-P-Y-E-R-A.
What he said. Yeah. Dapiera, okay. Short for dobro, yeah. All right, let's see. I kind of have to jump around. Let's see. I was talking about Charlie Patton, and I'll go back and hit a little bit. There's a book that's come out recently about Robert Johnson. It just came out, I think, maybe a month ago. It's called Up Jump the Devil, and it is it's by a guy, Bruce, I forget his last name, the author, but he has interviewed some other guys, and I know a guy down in Clarksdale. His name's Robert Birdsong. He's kind of a local historian down there, so every time I'm down there, I always talk to him about whatever. And he told me about this book about, man, it's been 6 months or a year ago. He said, there's a book coming out that, and I have not read it yet. It's called Up Jump the Devil, Up Jump the Devil. And it supposedly kind of tells more of the true story of Robert Johnson and doesn't get into the myths and the, sold your soul at the crossroads kind of mystique, because down there people say that a lot of that stuff isn't true, but people will kind of let it go because if it sells and it makes them money, then they'll just kind of say, well, yeah, that might be true. That might be true too. Yeah, he probably died right here, because I used to have played at a place that's about a quarter mile from where he's buried, where Robert Johnson's buried. And I believe that there are, I think, 2 or 3 places there down in the Delta that they say he is buried, but this last place, which is right outside of Greenwood, Mississippi, everybody kind of thinks that's probably where he's buried, because there was an eyewitness. In the 80s, this woman came forth and said, yeah, I know Robert Johnson, the musician, is buried here under this pecan tree, and it's in the cemetery of the Little Mount Zion Baptist Church, I want to say, or Little Mount Zion Church. And she said, I know he's buried there because my husband dug the grave. So, and she died, I think, in the 80s at some point, so she would have been alive in 1938 when he died. So anyway, a lot of the stuff that you hear about Robert Johnson may or may not be true, and supposedly this book kind of clears up some things. So if you get a chance, read it. I will. I should do this song now. I'll do a Robert Johnson song I haven't done. This one actually is on my second album called Songs from Room 414. They say that this might be a Ike Zinnerman song, or Robert Johnson may have got this from a guy named Ike Zinnerman that he stayed with down in Beauregard, Mississippi for the time that he was gone. I went over this last time, so I'll just hit it briefly. Everybody in the Delta knew Robert, and he was a young kid, kind of a punk, and he couldn't play at all. He'd just make noise. He'd show up at the gigs with Son House and Willie Brown, and they would chase him off, say, get out of here, you can't play, you're gonna run all these people off, And so he disappears for a period of time. Some people say it's was 6 months. Some people say it was for as long as a couple years. And then he comes walking back, and he comes into a juke joint where Son House was playing, and he's like, look there, there's little Robert. They call him Little Robert. He said, look, there's little Robert, come back. And he said, let me play. So they finally agreed to let him play. And their jaws hit the floor. They just couldn't believe how good he was. Thus, the myth of he must have sold his soul to the devil, you know, to be able to play that good. But in theory, or what I've heard is he was actually down, staying with this guy named Ike Zinnerman down in Beauregard and practicing every night in the graveyard down there. And so he practiced enough to get good. Anyway, I'll do this song. It's called Come On in My Kitchen. You better come on down in my kitchen, 'cause it's good to be raining outdoors, yeah. The woman I love stuck with my best friend out. Joker got lucky, stole it back again. Oh, you better come on in my kitchen, 'cause it's going to be rain outdoors, yeah. When the woman gets in trouble, everybody throws her down, looking for a good friend. They can't be found. Oh, you better come on in my kitchen, 'cause it's going to be rain outdoors, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Lord, 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 Lord. You better come on in my kitchen, 'cause it's going to be rain outdoors, yeah. I know she's gone, start coming back, yeah. Got stole and leave them, have the nation sad. So that was recorded in 1936, November 23rd, 1936. And that was recorded down in San Antonio at the Gunter Hotel in room 414. I know because I've been there. That hotel is still there. It's about a couple blocks from the Alamo. 1933, Lead Belly records for the Library of Congress, supervised by John Lomax. Lead Belly's the only person I know that sung his way out of prison. Somehow, so the story goes, he could sing, and John Lomax and John Lomax and his son Alan Lomax were the ones that would go down in the South or wherever and record folk songs. and try to document all these songs that had never been written down. So anyway, John Lomax kind of discovered Leadbelly. Huddy Ledbetter, I think is his real name, they called him Leadbelly. He was in prison down in Parchment Farm, and I was just down in Mississippi, and you can, Parchment Farm is still there. It's on Route 49 as you go up north, heading toward Clarksdale. It's not too far from Indianola, I think, I want to say. Anyway, Leadbelly's in prison there, and John Lomax said, you know, this guy can sing, you know, I need to get him out so he can do some concerts for me, and somehow the warden said, okay, you can go. A lot of, like I said, a lot of those, I think Son House got out of prison that way. Back when you could get your boss to get you out, even if you were in prison for murder. If you know, if the boss needed you to work the farm, he could say, that's a valuable man, I need him to work. Okay, he's free. So, let's see. I wanted to mention this. In 1934, the first Santa Fe group of pianists recorded. It says Rob Cooper. I don't know if anybody remembers a guy here in Cincinnati named Pigmeat Jarrett. Does that ring any bells? I saw him once at Coco's in Covington, which is called something else now. It was in the 90s. I mean, Pigmeat lived to be almost 100 years old. And I remember going down there and seeing him play. And I was talking about Big Joe Duskin before, the piano player from Cincinnati, Big Joe, big boogie woogie piano player. I knew a couple guys that played with him, and they would always say, oh, Big Joe, he didn't like Pigmeat, you know. He's like, Pigmeat, all he does is one song. He does that Mr. Freddie song, whatever that is. Says he does that. I said, anybody can do that, Mr. Freddie. But I went down to see Pigmeat one time, and he was the real deal, man. I don't care if he did one song all night long. He had that cry in his voice. And I don't know if you know what I mean, but some of those guys could just sit there and play, and their voice was, you could feel the soul and the blues in their voice, and he had it. Pigmeat Jarrett was his name. Let's see, 1935 we have Blind Boy Fuller, first disc, first recorded in 1935. Blind Boy Fuller, I'm not too familiar with. I don't know any of his songs, but I know that Sonny Terry, the harmonica player Sonny Terry, used to play with him, started out with him. And I do have some show and tell things over here. I do have a 78 of Sonny Terry over there. It's got a crack on the bottom of it, so just if it falls apart, don't worry about it. Yeah, 78. I got my suitcase over there if you want to look at it, and I brought this guitar. I might play it, but I might not. This is actually a 1967 silver tone guitar, but the kind of guitars that all those guys played in the Delta, like I know Charlie Patton played a guitar like this, but the brand was Stella, S-T-E-L-L-A. But if you look at a Stella and you look at one of these, it's the exact same guitar. But they have that Delta sound. I'll play a little bit later, but they have that Delta sound. And this one's got, the bottom's falling off of this one, so it's got that extra Delta sound too. But, oh, I forgot, I'll tell you a story about it. I read in Son House's biography about how they went, I think it was 1929 or 1930, and according to this, Son House didn't record till 1930, so maybe it is 1930 that he went up, it was him, Son House, Charlie Patton, Willie Brown, who was mentioned in the song Crossroads. There was a real guy named Willie Brown that played with Son House a lot. And a guy named Wheeler Ford, who was the driver, because he was the driver, I think, because, and I don't know if I'm related to him, but Wheeler Ford was part of a gospel group, so he didn't drink, so they got him to drive, I think. And then they headed out from Clarksdale, and they stopped at a liquor store in Memphis. And they were headed toward Grafton, Wisconsin. They recorded up there, and they stopped at a liquor store in Memphis, had a few drinks on the way up, and then Charlie Patton got in a fight with his girlfriend, and so the story goes, he slapped her or something, and she got out, she said, "Stop this car," and they all got out of the car, and when they got out of the car, Charlie Patton, who had a guitar like this, it fell out of the car and he stepped on it and mashed it flat. So they had to stop again and buy another guitar for Charlie Patton, and they said it was $12 back then. $12 guitar. Yeah. Let's see. All right, so I mentioned Sonny Terry, and also in 1935, blind Gary Davis they have here, but we call him Reverend Gary Davis. He makes his recording debut, and I'm gonna play you a song that Reverend Gary Davis used to do. When I was down in April, I went to the Juke Joint. I played at the Juke Joint Festival, and then after that, I went down with my buddy who lives in Joe Smothers, who I mentioned earlier, who lives in Valdosta. He gets to play Merle Fest. It's a festival that was started by Doc Watson to honor his son Merle, who died in 1985. Merle died in a tractor accident, actually. And my friend Joe used to play with Merle back in the 70s, and then eventually got to playing with Doc. So when they have Merle Fest down in North Carolina it's usually every April, Joe gets to play down there. And I was down there with him. He got me in, and me and my wife, we got to go to the festival, and I got to talking to a guy named Roy Bookbinder. And Roy Bookbinder, he still does concerts out all over the country. He used to be Reverend Gary Davis's assistant or roadie, basically, because Reverend Gary Davis was blind, and when he traveled, he had to have somebody to, go with him. So Roy would always go with him. This is a song that Reverend Gary Davis said he learned from a street performer in the Carolinas when he was a boy. Reverend Gary used to live in the Carolinas, and then he wound up in Harlem. So he was in Harlem at the time of the folk blues revival in the early 60s. So anyway, he said he learned this song from a street performer, and I think somebody did some research. I read somewhere where this song was probably written around the time of the First World War, when they used to treat soldiers that came back from the war, when they had what they used to call shell shock, and they now call PTSD. They used to treat them with cocaine. It's probably not the best thing to do. So this song is called Cocaine Blues. It might sound familiar because in the 70s, Jackson Browne had a hit with it. I remember when I was a teenager in the 70s, I thought this was a Jackson Browne song. Walking up town, telling a man, looking for that guy that says cocaine, cocaine, running all around my brain. Bill Big, gonna be a quick now. So cocaine about to make me sick. Cocaine running all around my brain. They say cocaine's for horses, it ain't for men. Say to kill you, but they won't say when. Cocaine running all around my brain. All you young men, you ought to be like me. Drink the good corn liquor, that's a cocaine beat. Cocaine running all around my brain. Real big, come here quick now. This old cocaine about to make me sick. Cocaine running all around my brain. Da 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 da. I was talking to the doctor down at the hospital. He said, it says here, son, you're 27. I said, possible. Cocaine. Woke up this morning about 9:30. The gal got the chick trying to knock me blind. Cocaine running all around my brain. Real big, go very quick now. So cocaine about to make me sick. Cocaine running all around my brain. Here comes my baby dressed in red. Ah, baby, I'm better off dead. Cocaine running all around my brain. Cocaine running all around my brain. Cocaine blues. Thank you. Let's see if we have. We're going to try to find. I was going to do a song by Mississippi John Hurt and see when he recorded. If it's on here, I don't see him on it. I thought I did at one point. Oh, well. I know he recorded back in the 20s, and nothing really happened too much. So he went on home to Avalon, Mississippi, which is just northeast of Greenwood, not too far. It's off of Route 7 down there. I think if you take 55 down, and there's a Greenwood exit, or maybe it's the Batesville exit, I forget. Route 7 is how you get to Avalon. And I think the guy that rediscovered him, these young college kids in the early 60s would, they saw the opportunity, they could make some money and go down and get the old blues player and put him on the college circuit. And, I knew Tom Hoskins took half the money. He took half the money, and a lot of the guys kind of considered him not too ethical because he would take half the money and then he'd make old John Hurt pay for his hotel and everything with his half the money. So,
John Hurt related to Lou?
I'm not sure. No, I don't think so.
What was he, a clarinet player, I think, wasn't he?
I'm not familiar with it. I don't know. Maybe. But anyway, John Hurt died in, I think, 66. There's a famous photograph of him at Union Terminal, or I consider it famous. One of his best photographs they recorded, or they took at Union Terminal. I think that same year that he died, 66. What was I going to say about him? I'm going to do a song of his. It's from Avalon, and oh, I know what I was going to say. They usually have a festival. His granddaughter, Mary Hurt, usually does a festival down there on Labor Day every year, and I was planning on going this past Labor Day, but they changed it this year. They're going to have it the first weekend of October, and supposedly Taj Mahal is going to be there. So I'm going to try to go. It's the 5th and 6th of October, Saturday and Sunday, and they're going to do blues music on Saturday, and then Sunday they're going to do gospel music. But supposedly Taj Mahal is going to be there, and he's got a few players coming in. So, and people, I stay with some people that live in Money, it's not Money, it's Phillip, a little town called Phillip, Mississippi, that's not too far from there. And the guy there said, I don't know how they're going to get anybody in there. He said, have you ever been to Mississippi John Hurt's old home? It's just a little bitty road. And he's like, there's nowhere to park. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I don't know. We'll see. Try to do it. I heard Ruthie Foster sing this song, and I fell in love with it, and now I do it. It's called Richland Woman Blues, Mississippi John Hurt. Give me red lipstick, it's a bright for my roots. Sang about my hacker, light a shot of good booze. Pop it down, sweet daddy, come blow your horn. Baby, come tonight, say by my will be gone. Come along, young man, my time's sitting right. My husband gone away the next Saturday night. Pop it down, sweet daddy, and blow your horn. If you come tonight, say by my will be gone. I'm round to go, red shoes on my feet, my mind's sitting right, I fall within a lizard seat. Pop me down, sweet daddy, come blow your horn. If you come tonight, you buy me where we gone. Red rooster says, cock-a-doodle-doodle-doo. Richland woman says, many doodle-doo. Pop it down, sweet daddy, come blow your horn. If you come tonight, say by my will be gone. After Sunday morning, church people watch me go. The wings sprouted out, the preacher told me so. Pop it down, sweet daddy, come blow your horn. If you come tonight, Mama, where we gone? Step out the fashion shop. Get the Mona Lisa dress. You bought sweet mama, I bought some brand new dress. Papa down, sweet daddy, blow your horn. Baby, come to the light. Say, Mama, where we gone? Richland Woman Blues. Check the time. Oh, we got plenty. Or no, we don't. We're going to 7:30? Maybe. Okay. All right. Cool. Let's see. I ran out of time again. I wanted to mention a guy named Sonny Boy Williamson, who he's buried down in Tutwiler. He was from Tutwiler, Mississippi, which is about 15 minutes south of Clarksdale. And he was born Alec. His name was Alec Ford. His mother, I mentioned that last time. I always call him my cousin. He's like, he could be my cousin. Because his mom's name was Millie or Minnie Ford, I forget. I think it was Millie, maybe. And then she married a man named Miller. So he changed his name. His name then became Alec Miller, which I think that's what's on his tombstone. And then they started calling him Rice. So his name became Rice Miller. And then he had another name changed. There was a guy up in Chicago named Sonny Boy Williamson. Well, Sonny Boy, I can't plug this in. Sonny Boy Williamson died. So Alec Miller, went up to Chicago and just said, my name's Sonny Boy Williamson. I'm the real Sonny Boy Williamson. Because, I mean, think about it. You know, the name was already out there. All he had to do was show up and say, I'm Sonny Boy Williamson. He'd get a crowd, you know. Oh, Sonny Boy Williamson. I thought he was dead. No, he's playing over here, you know. So that's a good way to. I'm like, that guy was smart.
He lived to be 125.
Yeah. Nah, Sonny Boy, what they call him, Sonny Boy Williamson II, Alec Miller. He died in the '60s. He was famous for doing the King Biscuit Flour Hour, if you've ever heard of that. In the Delta, in Helena, Arkansas, there was this radio station, KF, I forget what it is. Like, I think it was every day at noon, he would go there and he'd play for, I don't know, it wasn't a long gig. I want to say 20 minutes, half hour or something. And they broadcast that all over the Delta. He got to be famous for being the King Biscuit Flour Hour guy. Oh, I gotta tune this up just a little bit. And then he went to Europe, and when a lot of those guys did, I think he was on tour with Muddy Waters, and those guys went to Europe and got to play. And then he came home. He came home to Helena to die. He said he had a feeling he was going to die, and he did. I was in Helena playing a couple years ago, and the guy showed me. He's like, "Yep, it's like where he died is like right. Go to the end of this block and go." So there used to be a house there. It's just an open lot now. But so Sonny Boy had an apartment up there and died. A very colorful character. I was talking to Z, I forget her last name. She's the owner of the famous Riverside Hotel in Clarksdale. That's where all the blues guys stayed. That's where Bessie Smith died, at the Riverside Hotel. It's right on the river, right on the Sunflower River there in Clarksdale. Bessie Smith was in an auto accident, and I don't remember I want to say it was in the 40s. I could be wrong, but the hospital would not admit her because she was black. And so she bled to death. They took her to this hotel, and they tried to take care of her, but she was bleeding too bad. But everybody had stayed in that hotel. If you go to Clarksdale, try to go there. A lot of times, I passed by it several times. I didn't think it was open anymore, but at this time, her name is Z-E-E, and she's the granddaughter of the original owner, and she's still, I think they only open it like on festival weekends or something, but I had a good conversation with her, and she's like, I'll give you a tour, but it's full now, but they've got the room that Muddy Waters stayed in, and where I was going with this was Sonny Boy Williamson had 2 rooms there at one time because he had 2 different girlfriends. He had 2 rooms. I'll see how he did that.
Wasn't too good bad.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to close this out then and do a song. I'll give you a little bit of history. This is a new song I wrote, so this is mine. There's a woman that used to live in Ruleville down there. It's right, I can't remember if it's south of Indianola or Ruleville, I think is a little bit north of Parchment Farm. It's right down there in the Delta. Ruleville is a town that if you've ever come across the film of Robert Johnson playing, a lot of times on Facebook they'll say, Robert Johnson playing live. This is a film of Robert Johnson playing live. It's not. It's somebody that kind of looks like Robert Johnson, and it's been authenticated by a lot of different players that say that's not Robert Johnson. But for a while there, they thought they had a film of Robert Johnson, but the way they kind of debunked it for sure was in the background you see a movie poster at a theater, and the movie didn't come out until 1941, and Robert Johnson died in 1938, so it can't be him. So, I'm going to do this song. I don't know if this guitar is going to pick up, so I'm going to kind of point I don't know. Maybe I'm just going to point this away a little bit and try to, let's see, we'll try to do this, and maybe I'll do this. Yeah, that's it. Real quick, this is not about a blues singer. This is about a civil rights activist called Fannie Lou Hamer. Have you ever heard of Fannie Lou Hamer? I just discovered her a few years ago. She was, a civil rights activist. She testified before Congress about her ordeal when she tried to register to vote, and I forget exactly what year that was, if it was 61 or if it was 59, somewhere around 1960. And so she testified in Congress, and President Johnson was the president then, and he did not want this to go out. It did not look good, so he called a press conference like that, and so all the networks went to his press conference, and she was kind of shut down. Her testimony did not go out on the news that night, but her ordeal about trying to register to vote in Indianola, they went to a group of black people went to Indianola to take the test. They had to pass a test in order to vote, and they got in all kinds of trouble. And so just Google Fannie Lou Hamer and you can read about it. This is a song called Fannie Lou Hamer, but it has the phrase Mississippi appendectomy. If you don't know what that is, Google that, and I'll tell you real quick what it was. It was a lot of times, and I don't know exactly what year this happened to her or when it stopped happening, but in the South, if you were a poor black person and you went into the hospital for some procedure, and she went into the hospital to remove a tumor, I think, on her ovaries, and she came out sterilized, basically. So they thought that they were doing you a favor by, sterilizing you. She did not have any kids at the time, so she wound up adopting a couple kids, but it was nicknamed the Mississippi appendectomy. I'll do a little bit of this to close this out. Fannie Lou Hamer got something to say, Lord, something to say. Took them cameras and it took them away from Mr. LBJ. Well, we went to Indianola, our names to sign right across that line. Well, they told the bus driver had to pay that fine. Mr. Bus Driver, you got to pay that fine, Lord. Well, he said Mississippi ain't ready for that, ain't ready for that, ain't ready for that. Had to leave my home, had to leave that shack. Can't never go back, can't never go back. Oh my, what they done to me? Got my Mississippi appendectomy. Oh my, what they done to me? Got my Mississippi appendectomy. Got my Mississippi appendectomy. Well, highway patrol, this is what he said. This is what he said. This is what he said. Gonna make you wish you was dead. Make you wish you was dead. Make you wish you was dead, Lord. Well, I heard them beatings and the black girls scream, and the black girls scream, and the black girls scream. Yeah, I say yes, sir. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you mean. Lord. Well, they laid me down, tied my hands behind me, tied my hands behind me, tied my hands behind me. Oh, my brother, ain't you the same as me? Ain't you the same as me? Ain't this the land of the free? Oh, my, what they done to me? Got my Mississippi appendectomy. Oh, my, what they done to me? Got my Mississippi appendectomy. Got my Mississippi appendectomy, Lord. Thank you very much.